Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do on Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. For those of you that I guess don't know, you can subscribe to get notified when I go live by texting the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. Yes. So, let me hop into the chat here and get that going. Butterfly is here, says hello, says hi, hi. Well, hi, hi to you as well. I apologize. I wasn't here last week. I don't remember why. I don't remember what came up. Something came up. So I apologize for not being here. Changing my life says hello, everyone. Hello. How is everybody doing? How is your week going? Jack says I'm really struggling. Is anything that you feel comfortable sharing in the chat? And I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that you're struggling. Um, I hope that that doesn't last for too long. Joey says, "Yay, I made it from the start. Hello, all." Hello, Joey. Sarah, yes. Sarah says, "I'm somewhat new. I'm about 2 months no contact and keep finding more and more evidence that shows me I'm on the right track and was with an emotionally abusive partner. It's eye-opening." Yes, indeed it is. It really is. And my guess is going to be as you continue to move forward and understanding uh, kind of different forms of abuse and boundary violations in general, it's going to continue to be eye opening. This can be incredibly painful. This level of awareness at first, it can, it, there's, it's a wide mix of emotions. Um, and, but I guess I just wanted to add that on the other side of this, or kind of throughout this journey, the, the cool part is that you'll learn so much about kind of reclaiming and rebuilding who you are. And yeah, just shedding limiting beliefs that you might have picked up from society or from your parents or from friends or from who knows, and really rebuilding yourself and your life into something that's authentically you. And when we get to that place where we find our self worth and we realize, you know what? I I know what's comfortable for me. I know what's uncomfortable for me. I know how I like to be treated. I know how I don't like to be treated. I know what nourishes me. I know what drains me. When you start getting all of that sorted out, that's when your life really begins to work. And yeah, things just click into place. So um, we're glad that you're here. So Huffle Mom is here as usual. Welcome, Huffle. And just a quick shout out to the mods. Thank you guys so much. I don't, uh, I know I say it, but I probably don't say, actually, I know I don't say it anywhere near enough. You guys are awesome. Thank you for everything that you do. It's much appreciated. Jennifer is here. Lori says, yes, I have to be me. Yes. And what's so wild about that is you when you start getting in tune with kind of what nourishes you, what drains you, what's for you, what's not for you, all of that, and you're able to start setting boundaries around that and really like valuing your emotions, valuing your time, valuing your body, valuing your space, everything. There comes a point where you're like, I cannot believe I did anything different. Because when we step into that, and kind of step into our power, step into our boundaries, um, it's like we can breathe. And so anything less feels really stifling because it is, because it's not authentic. Okay. Jack was saying moderator type stuff coming up. Um, I will check on that Friday and get back to you. I apologize. Yeah, we've had a lot always, right? Always had a lot going on, and trying to get one of my main goals for this year um, is really to get some systems in place, because my challenge has been there's so many different things going on with the website and the support group and the YouTube channel. I mean, all of these different, it feels like it's spinning plates. And I'm very scattered kind of as it is, and I really struggle with time blindness. So I think in my brain, I'm like, oh, it's only been a few days, but it could be 3 weeks. So um, I think in order for everything to run a lot smoother, I need to uh, kind of both grow the team here and figure out systems in which it's not all left up to me and my brain to remember, because that's been a challenge. So kind of getting the right people and the right systems and everything kind of running smoothly. Yeah, it's just been a process. So I apologize for for all of that frustration and that kind of the lack of communication on my part, and um, all of that. So yes, I did see, Jack, you said I forwarded the book suggestion, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wasn't sure. I didn't see a title there. I saw something about verbal and emotional abuse, and Jack had mentioned, is this the book by Patricia Evans? And that was kind of what I was wondering too. So if it is Moon Grable, if the book that you were referring to that you wanted to add to the book club list was the book The Verbally Abusive Relationship by Patricia Evans, we read that book, but it was a long time ago. It was, gosh, what, 5 years ago? uh, I do have those notes from that book on my website. Um, the new site is going live, I believe, tomorrow. So but I think the link should still be the same. If you go under book club, you should see the notes on the verbally abusive relationship. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. It's and frankly, for anybody here, um, let's see, Sarah, this is definitely a recommendation for you as well. That book, the verbally abusive relationship by Patricia Evans, it's I just love it. It's so fantastic in so many different ways. And I think one of the main ways it's fantastic is that she talks about verbal abuse in a way that I don't think I've heard it talked about before. And so she talks more about what would be considered like kind of covert or um like more subtle forms of verbal abuse. Things, the kinds of behaviors that I think a lot of us have tended to minimize and justify and try to convince ourselves that it's not a big deal or that it's somehow workable. So, um, yeah, her book is just it's phenomenal for that. Daniel Ray says, "Well, keep growing. It's nice to hear about your growth." Well, yeah, I appreciate it. It's talk about a rocky ride. Angie and I were just talking about that the other day. Was telling her, um, I feel like in many ways she's been kind of, I haven't kind of been pulling my weight, I guess, so to speak, with, um, you know, kind of doing as much outreach as she does, and kind of keeping up with everything. And I was telling her, I said, I was all gung ho, and then we had the house fire, and you know, lost pretty much everything, and then had to rebuild, and then um, then I was like, kind of got a second wind. Okay, things are going good. Kind of chugging along, and then boom, my dad gets diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So it's just um, yeah. You start kind of moving along, and then life happens, and yeah. So knock on wood that I'll have some smoother sailing here. Oh, okay. So Miss Moon Grable was saying yes, the book that she was asking about was the one by Patricia Evans. Okay. Yes, fantastic book. Have you read it, or was this a suggestion for a book club? Okay, let me scroll down here and see what's going on. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So Moon Grable was saying, yep, that's why I was suggesting it. So there could be a video. She says, I have read it, but there's always others that haven't. Yes, absolutely. And you know what? Maybe because it has been quite a while since we did that book club for that book, and maybe that's one that's well, maybe not. Maybe it is. I mean, it's that book is in my, I would say, probably top 5 books out there in terms of kind of understanding and healing from abuse. It's just fantastic. So I would be open to doing it again, because yeah, there are new people here, and the last book club, the last book club was so long ago. Here's the other thing too about books, which is so, I don't know, kind of fun, I guess, is that uh, uh, our understanding of books grows and changes as we grow and change. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you read a book at a certain point in your life, and then you come back to it 5, 10, 20 years later, and you pick up totally different information, or you see things in a totally different light. So yeah, that would be interesting to do a reboot discussion, a reboot book club discussion on that. Yes. Moon Grable says, books and healing. It's a circle to keep going around. And Jack was saying, oh, I guess Hufflemom and Jack are both looking for the video on it. Jack can't find the video on it. Yeah, I mean, I would put money on it that I did a book club on it. Maybe it was early, maybe it was in, the beginnings of maybe it was longer than 5 years ago. Maybe it really was in the beginning of my channel, before I was doing videos on for book club. Sarah says, can you talk about how important it is that I get to I'm not quite sure what you're saying. Can you talk about how important it is that I get to her phase of grief to move on? My therapist says that. Could you speak a little bit more as to what you mean by her phase of grief? Charlotte says, hi, Dana. I'm wondering if you could kindly bring some clarity to a situation. I ended a relationship with a suspected sociopath a few years ago. Okay. Okay, I'm waiting for Charlotte to type the second part of her question here. Okay, so while Charlotte's typing that, Sarah clarified that what she meant by the her phase of anger is anger phase. Gotcha. That makes a lot more sense. Um, okay, so Sarah's question was, can you talk about how important it is that I get to the anger phase of grief to move on? So okay, so here's the thing. There's different phases or what's known as stages of grief. These stages were identified by psychologist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I want to say back in like the 70s, I think. However, what's important about this is that these stages of grief um, that they're specifically for a person who's dying. And somewhere along the line that got lost. And so it's the stages of grief that Kubler-Ross identified are frequently referred to as kind of, oh, these are just the stages of grief in general. With that said, they're pretty spot on. I think a lot of people tend to go through them. However, again, with that said, um, that not every person goes through all of the stages. Not every person goes through the stages in the same order, and not every person goes through the stages in a linear fashion. So let me pull up her model real quick. Okay, so her five stages of grief for the stages of grief model that we're talking about here is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So, um, like I said, everybody grieves differently. Everybody has their own entry point into that. And we tend to go round and round and round through these different stages until we reach kind of like an acceptance of the situation. Some people might even start with what they think is acceptance of kind of it is what it is, uh, you know, and they kind of have a peace with it. But then in time, other emotions start to surface. So, uh, I guess my 2 cents on it is everybody's grieving process is different. I wouldn't stress too much if you're not experiencing one of the stages because that's very normal for, like I said, not everybody experiences every single stage. Um, and sometimes stages take time to work through. It can take a person uh, years to move into a different stage. That doesn't, but also want to qualify that with it. That doesn't mean that your healing is on hold during that time. Like we feel how we feel when we feel it. There is no rushing the process. There is no um, any um, kind of changing the process, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck in a holding pattern as in your life. So it's, I think most people that have experienced grief, and I think there's something like there's over 43 different types of grief that a person experiences in their lifetime. Um, we all experience some form of grief, whether or not we identify, or I'm sorry, 43 types of loss in a lifetime. Um, whether or not we identify that loss as a form of grief is something else. A lot of people don't. Or as I kind of, frankly, I've yet to come across a society that um, really kind of has a healthy relationship with sadness and loss and grief. That doesn't say that they don't exist. That's just saying, like, it's not on my radar. There very well might be. Some societies are more embracing of kind of death and dying or kind of life transitions. And here in the United States, that's really not the case. It's there's kind of this rugged individualistic mentality of you got to kind of um, suck it up and keep moving forward. And because there's that message that's sent kind of through society, through maybe through family, through friends, through whoever, it can be a real challenge for people to be in touch with sadness and and um, and kind of all the different emotions that go along with it. So yeah, I will say one of the things that can help with the grieving process is journaling or talking things out loud. If you're not a big fan of writing, turning on your voice memo on your phone and and giving yourself space. So maybe if you're sitting in your car or if you're in the backyard or whatever it might be, or walking down the street, turn on voice memos and then just start talking. And you might even find that it can help to kind of give yourself a prompt. So maybe um, thinking of we could take the Kubler-Ross model. So you could do 5 different recordings on, 5 different days and say, okay, day one, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about anger and how it pertains to my situation. And then just free form talk about it. s- Everything that you're saying, I'm really struggling with being angry right now, or the opposite. I am so angry I can't even think straight. I don't know how to feel. There's a part of me that thinks, she had some untreated mental illness. I feel like I shouldn't be mad at her because part of this maybe was the untreated mental illness, but then part of me is mad that I stayed and um, that um, that things kind of happened the way that they happened, or I feel frustrated. My therapist is encouraging me to feel anger. I don't I I'm struggling with what that would mean or what that would look like or how to go about that. Just doing a brain dump of everything that's on your mind regarding that one topic. And so again, those 5 are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And at a minimum, it'll kind of help clarify like what's swimming around in your mind regarding each of those topics. Let's see here. Let's see. Book club. Book club was the last book was the Marie Kondo book on um, what is it? The magic of tidying up, something along those lines. The next book we're reading is a book on Kaizen. I'd have to go dig up my book club list, but um, yeah, that'll be on the website tomorrow because it's launching tomorrow. So you'll be able to get it then. Okay, so Charlotte says the part of her question, okay, had to do with a relationship ended. Okay, she was with a very sociopathic man for 10 months. He targeted me for money and racially abused me. He then picked a worse looking woman who he financially supports and adores for 5 years. This has lasted 5 years of her treating her like gold. I don't understand it. Thanks for your advice. Well, I guess there's a couple of things with that. I get first off, we don't know how things are behind closed doors. And so take that for what you will. Um, so he and if he was horrible to you, which he was, then then really that's all that matters. And I know that can be difficult to see because it's sort of like, well, wait a minute, none of this makes sense. Like, why, um, why was he so horrible to me, and why is he so good to her? Like, what's different about her, and does that mean that there's something wrong with me, kind of a thing? And the reality is, there's all kinds of different drivers for a person's behavior, but again, going back to we don't know what happens behind closed doors either. So It could be, it could, it, my guess, I mean, my guess is if he targeted you for money and then racially abused you, and then he might, that behavior might be coming from like a deep sense of insecurity, uh, kind of racially motivated, well, misogyny in general, but then kind of racially motivated misogyny. He might have an axe to grind against a certain type of woman. And he might be really upset. I don't know you know, um, your nationality or your skin color or his skin color or any of that, but it might be that he found um, that threatening. So let's say, for example, if you're a person of color, him, or actually even if you weren't, even if he was black, you were white, or vice versa, it might have been just kind of this deep seated thing of him taking his frustrations out on you, um, and being like, oh well, uh, that's again, it's just this misogynistic kind of racially thing of a person who's different from me can't be better than me. That's what it boils down to. So that sounds like that might be a driver in his behavior. He might feel more secure with a woman who is significantly less attractive. He might have had a deep seated um, fear of, oh well, gosh, she makes good money, um, she's got all these other things going for her, that he's more comfortable with somebody um, who doesn't have those things going for them. So but that's concerning, right? So that relationship isn't really being treated like gold. It's him kind of having her under his thumb, and him taking comfort in her being less than. So just kind of that alone, like that relationship that's problematic. So because it doesn't really allow her any space to grow or to um, for self improvement or any of that. If he's only taking comfort in the fact that he perceives her as kind of from a less than position, then um, yeah. But sociopathic behavior, even if, and sometimes that does happen where a person like Ted Bundy, brutal, horrific serial killer, uh, viciously murdered 20 something women. But he also, at the same time, had a girlfriend at home who, by all reports, said that he was a pretty good boyfriend. So it's weird how that mind works, and those switches can be flipped, but it has nothing to do with you or with her. It has everything to do with him. So normal, happy, healthy, well-adjusted people don't go around destroying others. And there is no relationship possible with somebody um, who's abusive like that. There's no growth possible. There's no for you. There's no room to breathe. There's no. It's very stifling, and it's just not conducive. It's not conducive for growth. So I guess when you think back on that relationship, try to remind yourself of that. Of he treated you horribly, and that that's enough. That's enough of a reason for you to drive on and to not look back. There's nothing there for you with him. And it's really tragic that even if he kind of quote unquote treats her like gold that we can see from the outside looking in, um, it's very conditional that he's treating her like gold. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be with somebody who treated anybody horribly. Not, they don't need to just treat me well, they need to treat everybody well. If I'm dating somebody and I find out that they're horrible to the gas station attendant, or they're horrible to somebody in like or somebody, the CEO of a company, that they feel entitled to go around destroying other people, that's we're done. Like that's disgusting. That's a huge deal breaker. So yeah, it's not you, it's them. And that behavior is outrageous, and it's just not okay. So mm. Hi, Gary. Gary, thanks for the live stream donation. He says, Hi, Dana. I'm no contact with someone who has an avoidant personality. She doesn't believe people can love her. I tried to help her overcome her past traumas, but she would shut down. I have feelings for her and I miss her. Mm, no, my heart goes out to you. It's incredibly difficult to, I think, for kind of the, the caring people of the world to see a hurting person. And a lot of people with those avoidant attachment styles, they're that way because they have been hurt, and so there is that level of distance. They kind of keep everyone at arm's length, and we all wish that it would be, that we could fix them, that we could just kind of, with our love, that we could just give them a big hug and squeeze all of their pieces back together again, and it just doesn't work that way. And um yeah, and it's understandable that you have feelings for her, and uh, and unfortunately, like, that's something that her healing has to come from within. And it can be quite the long process because it's not just avoidance that she's experiencing. It's she feels unlovable. So there's low, like, really low self-esteem. And that's the only way for a person to get that worked out, is for them to do the work of working it out. And some people, and that may or may not happen. So, uh, yeah, and this can be a very kind of painful, this is a painful experience for you. It's a painful experience for anybody to love, to see kind of the good in another person. They're like, wow, you're so great. Like, there's so many things that are like good and right and lovable about you. And it, yeah, I wish you could see you through my eyes, because I just think you're so great. And for them to not see it, it's just heartbreaking. Uh, so I would also encourage you, kind of moving forward, to the relationships that you have with other people in general, friendships or relationships with women or whatnot, is to really try to come from a place of mutuality. So finding that balance there of, um, kind of that give and take, where you're not in that role of caregiver or therapist or parent or any of that, because that imbalance, um, in time, it's a breeding ground for resentment, for you or for them. And it's very lopsided. It's sort of like, those toy tops that you spin. It's like that. If it's like a relationship is like a spinning top, but then when things kind of get off balance, so the an example of that off balance is, you have one person that's more in that parent role, the other person that's more in that child role, or one person that's more in the wounded role, the other person that's more in the caregiver role. Things are off balance, and just like that top is spinning, it starts to wobble, and it'll wobble more and more and more until that balance gets corrected. And so a lot of these relationships that are so imbalanced tend to topple over. And um, but for, yeah, there kind of that here's another thing to consider too, Gary, is that imbalance for a lot of people, um, can be a pattern of behavior. So this is something really for you to look at, is, do you find yourself kind of, drawn to, I should say, or in relationships with, or even in friendships with, kind of the baby bird with the broken wing type people? If that's the case, if there's a pattern of that, then that's something really to examine. And I'm not saying by any stretch that to not care about other people, or to not reach out to them, or to not want to support them, but there is that balance there, and it's important that that balance is there. So, um, yeah, just something to kind of think about as you move forward. So Ellen says, thank you. Without your videos, I would still be with the narcissist. Well, I'm glad that my videos were able to help, and we're glad you're here. And I thank you for the live stream donation. Lori also asked, she asked, what is the next book? Sorry, I need to look it up. I answered that before. I don't know off the top of my head, but it'll be on the website tomorrow, new website tomorrow. The book club discussion, it's the last Thursday of every month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when the next discussion will be. So whenever that is, end of April. And Jack was saying, he says, I'm an emotional wreck. And that just, well, I'm angry. Not angry at Dana per se, but angry that like I poured my emails down a virtual rabbit hole, a virtual rat hole. Yeah. Jack, I don't blame you for being frustrated and upset and angry. You've done a lot for this community. And, you know, like you've done a lot for me. And I sincerely apologize. It's okay for you to be upset and angry with me. I don't blame you one bit. But please know I am working on it, and I will going to make a note right now so I don't forget, because that's the other thing is I tend to think, oh, I'll remember, and then I don't, and then I feel terrible about it. So okay. Okay. Writing it down, putting it by my monitor. Uh, so you know what? Actually, let's go back to grief real quick here. Let me pull up a document that I was actually working on earlier about that very thing. So, okay, so this can be helpful in terms of examining some of that. We were talking about the different unhelpful messages about sadness and grief that we pick up through society, that we pick up through family, that we pick up through any number of things. This list comes from a book called The Grief Recovery Handbook. It's fantastic. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. Highly recommend it. I think it's on book club list, but I think it's possibly next year, or it's a lot later on this year. But it's a great book. Um, okay, so some of the unhelpful messages that are out there in terms of grief are basically that we need to grieve alone. So Huffle Mom was saying her dad had made a comment to her about where was it? Something, I forget the wording, like, oh, quit your mooing, I think is what he said. Um, so the message is we tend to pick up the message of grieve, that we need to grieve alone. That if we're experiencing sadness, people might say, "Oh, well, go ahead and go into the room and collect yourself. Kind of dry your tears. I'll let you be alone. I'll give you some space." And again, a lot of these messages come from a place of good intentions, but the message that a lot of us tend to pick up on is that there's something wrong with feeling sad, that there's something wrong with grief, and there's not. It's a very normal human emotion to experience. So one of the messages, grieve alone. um, the other message, or another message, is to keep hurt, anger, and sadness inside and don't share it with other people. Kind of, it's uncomfortable, it's inappropriate, it's oversharing. Nobody wants to hear it. You're being a big wet blanket. Like, it's these kinds of feelings. So, or it's the, I don't want to bother anybody, right? I don't want to burden them. I already feel sad. I don't want them to feel sad too. So I'll just keep it all inside because I just don't want to upset anybody else. Another one can be that sadness will be met with anger or frustration. from other people, this tends to take the form of kind of toxic positivity of, oh, well, look on the bright side, or other people have it worse, or depending on the situation, oh, you just got to forgive and forget. It's some sort of minimization and invalidation that goes along with, or that can go along with, with letting other people know I'm sad. It's kind of this knee jerk human reaction we have. We see somebody sad, we kind of the default reaction is, oh, I want them to feel better. I don't want them to feel sad, because most empathetic people, like, you see a hurting person and you don't want them to hurt. You want the hurt to go away. But the challenge with that is, um, if they're feeling, there's nothing wrong if you're, it's appropriate to feel hurt if you've been hurt, or it's appropriate to feel grief and sadness if you're going through something if you're grieving and you've experienced a loss. So, but again, that unintended message is often, keep your sadness to yourself. Other people have it worse. Look on the bright side. These kinds of things. Another unhelpful message is, well, kind of going along with that. It's things aren't that bad. You're okay. Well, gosh, you survived. Look at you. You survived. Or the back, that things could always be worse. Other people have it worse. Yeah, you don't have problems. Your problems are first world kind of problems. My guess would be that probably a lot of probably the people that experience this on a regular basis would be celebrities. If you pick up any kind of magazine or whatnot, you hear about the celebrities, um, um, in rehab, or they're experiencing some really heavy stuff. They're struggling with major addiction. And I always wonder kind of how often that goes hand in hand with kind of the lack of empathy. People are like, oh, what, you're like in the top 0.001%. You don't have problems. Like, you've got money, you've got fame, you've got all the women or the men or whatever it is. You have no problems. And it's that chronic invalidation, which, you know, um, wherever a person is on the socioeconomic scale, like grief and sadness and pain, they don't look at your checking balance, you know. So let's see. Oh, the message might be too that don't tell others how you feel, that we need to lie. This tends to go hand in hand with a lot of people making small talk. People say, oh, how are you? Right? Another person says, oh, I'm fine. Like, nothing's really being said. It's just kind of this greeting that we all have. And it's this expectation that people say, oh, I'm fine, or some level of maybe a little bit better than fine. But if you're really having a hard time, people, uh, they don't really want to know exactly how you feel. It's just some kind of knee-jerk phrase that people tend to say. So the result is, it's sort of like, okay, I can't tell people how I really feel because it's going to make them uncomfortable, or it's going to just be too much. So I'll just keep it to myself and lie and tell people that I'm okay when I'm not. The other message is that I need to be strong for others. Again, that goes back to the uh, um, other people have their own problems, and so I don't want to burden them with mine, and or that I somehow need to handle this by myself, or that I need to um, that I need to kind of just be strong and get over it, quote unquote, get over it. Along with that, there's the message that other people's feelings are more important, to put yourself second, and that your needs and feelings don't matter. So if it's the grieving process, it depends on the situation. It might be this feeling of, well, I don't want to share this with my friend, um, who's having a hard time, or I don't want to share. I don't want to I don't want my kids to see me cry. If you're going through a divorce, like these kinds of things. Um, So, yeah, kind of examining what are some of the messages, because oftentimes The messages that we've picked up about sadness are the same messages that tend to keep us stuck. And it's a way that we have been generally unconsciously invalidating ourselves, thinking, oh, I can't express this emotion. I shouldn't feel this emotion. I shouldn't feel this emotion to this extent. Everybody's got problems, right? I mean, people get divorced all the time, or geez, pets die all the time, or, um, I'm not, my problem isn't special and unique. Therefore, I really shouldn't feel sad about it. But the reality is, you feel how you feel. And if something sad happens, it's understandable that you would feel sad. And not only sad, but then those other emotions that tend to accompany sadness. So, okay. Let's see here. Charlotte says, I love your videos. My narcissist described that I died in his dream. I never thought anything of it until I saw you mention that this could mean that I was in danger. This is so frightening. Do you have any resources on this? I don't have any, I guess I don't have any resource, at least if I do have resources, none come to mind. Is there any type of resource in particular that you're looking for that? Generally, when um, what can be concerning about that is it's I don't even know if there's a term for it. It's like a form of projection, but it's um or what would that be? It's kind of they're taking their own uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and they're either putting them on you or they're kind of displacing them and saying that they had a dream about it when they really well, then they might have, but sometimes they don't. Like it's just swimming around in their head and they say that. Like a more recent example of that is Chris Watts, the guy who in Colorado who murdered his family. He had sent his wife a picture of a Barbie doll covered up with a sheet, kind of like morgue style, a few days before he killed her. And she had shared it with her best friend and was like, kind of like, what the hell? Like, this is really weird. And it was supposed to be a joke, but there's nothing funny about that. It's just it's disturbing, right? So uh, that kind of stuff, that kind of stuff, I encourage people to take very seriously. It's not normal. It's not even in the zip code of normal behavior. It's not funny. It means that person is thinking some really dark thoughts. Whether or not they're acknowledging or accepting those dark thoughts is another story. And frankly, it doesn't matter. It's concerning. So, Amazon DI9, thank you for the live stream donation. So, um, in my experience with that, and it's funny that you should mention this because I was just sorting through my Dropbox today and I came across the image that I think that might have been the video that you're referring to, and I had forgotten about it. I mean, it's been a long time. I'd forgotten about it, and thankfully took a picture. He had sketched a drawing of me sitting on the couch, and then up in the corner, it was a drawing of a snake with like the outline of like a snake had swallowed a person, and there was a person inside of the snake. And at the time, um, I don't remember. I don't remember what my reaction was to it. I don't. If anything, I just thought like, okay, that's kind of weird. But then I brushed it off, and it was just a weird thing because that drawing ended up in I had a stuck between pages of a book or something. I came across it after that relationship ended, and I had forgotten about it. Um, and the realization, because at the end of that relationship, I was strongly suspecting that he had been drugging me or poisoning me or something, and then to see that drawing, it kind of confirmed it. It was like, okay, no, that's not that far fetched that this would have been something that's on his mind. Um, this is not normal for a person um, to draw these things. So just, yeah, I'm a big fan. of, well, I should say these days. These days, I've come to realize that fearing your partner, fearing their behavior, fearing retaliation, fearing retribution, especially if you're setting boundaries or, um, any of that. Fear is not a normal emotion to experience in a relationship. So if you're afraid that they're going to hit you, that they're going to drain your bank account, that they're going to punish, that they're going to take out their anger or frustration on you or the kids or on your pets or any of that, that's not normal. And that's a sign that this is an abusive relationship. So, very strong indicator that there's some major problems going on there. Ellen was saying, yeah, unhelpful grief messages, plus the get over it. She says, I hate that one. It usually means others want to manipulate you. It can, definitely can. And then Ellen was saying, if you don't grieve, you can't move on. And I agree completely that the if anybody's looking for, maybe we need to just do this for, let me make a note. Let me, ay. Because I already have the book club list for the rest of this year, but we might have to just do a separate series on these two books. Hold on. Okay. So the two books that that I would recommend reading in order. The first one is The Grief Recovery Method. Again, fantastic book. There's exercises throughout the book. And again, we'll have to figure out some sort of way to do this because it's important to do the exercises and to not just read the book. So grief recovery method first, and then the second is what is it called? The Tao of Fully Feeling by Pete Walker. Fantastic. Fantastic, fantastic. So those two really help to process all of the feelings surrounding grief. Jennifer says, yeah, it's what my boyfriend says sometimes. He jokingly says stuff like, oh, well, you survived. It's annoying, but I let it go. Yeah. And Miss Lee says, yeah, how do we deal with that invalidation? I would say call it out for what it is. So like in Jennifer's situation, her boyfriend saying, oh, well, you survived, saying, yes, I did. And I'm outrageously thankful for that. However, making comments like, oh, well, you survived, it's invalidating. And I don't think you necessarily mean it that way, but that's definitely how it comes across. And what happened to me was incredibly painful. It can help too to give people some context, uh, maybe in other situations. Um, like if somebody survived a really horrific car crash, it's not helpful to tell them, or war. I think people maybe understand that a little bit better. If somebody comes back from war and they're feeling traumatized by the things that they've experienced, then it's not helpful to say, oh, well, but you know what, but you survived. Okay, I sure did, but there's a part of me that didn't. And that's the part of me that's in a lot of pain. And that part needs to be heard and validated. So um, this is really, I think, a large part of why people struggle with mental health is because of kind of these seemingly benign or even well-intended messages that that are passed around out there. Like, okay, well, yeah, you survived, or okay, but it's time to move on, or got to look forward, not back. This kind of thing. It's it doesn't leave room to just sit there and acknowledge like this hurt deeply, because the thing about the thing that kind of keeps people, I think, quote unquote, stuck in grief, stuck in that holding process, or stuck in one of those stages of grief, is um, that they're not able to work through it. And oftentimes they're not able to work through it because of what the messages that other people are telling them, and then the messages that they're telling themselves. And then this kind of spirals into all of this shame and embarrassment of, oh, I shouldn't miss my ex. They were abusive. Um, I should be glad it's over, right? Or things could have been worse. Well, at least your ex didn't hit you. Or at least your ex, if they did hit you, at least they didn't break a bone. Okay, well, if they broke a bone, at least they didn't break two bones. Okay, well, if they broke two bones, at least they didn't put you in the hospital. Okay, if they put you in the hospital, at least it wasn't in intensive care. Okay, well, if it wasn't intensive care, at least it wasn't in a coma. Okay, well, if it wasn't a coma, at least you didn't die. Well, what the hell? You know, that's real, that's really invalidating to tell somebody, because what they went through was outrageously painful. And that's, I think, oftentimes kind of the worst, um, one of the biggest challenges when with psychological and emotional abuse is other people can't see it. You know, you have a broken bone. I don't know how many times I've heard from other people, and how many times I've thought that too, of, I wish I had some sort of physical proof that there was something wrong, that somebody could see this. And it's yeah, that's the big challenge with all of this. So okay, let's see. Let me thank you, Victoria. This is the book club book. She says, okay, the book club book is Robert Moore, Maurer. The book is called One Small Step Can Change Your Life. It's the Kaizen Way. And if this is your first time hearing about this book, you might, if you get it on audiobook, the audiobook, from what I remember, is very different from the paperback book. Um, the audiobook, the guy, okay, there's a couple things. The guy, Robert, is a fantastic speaker. He's very engaging. The book topic is not what you would maybe consider to be traditional kind of self-help, or traditional kind of books that are very directly related to abuse and healing, like the other books that we tend to read for book club. What the reason I chose this book is, and the reason I think it's helpful, is because it talks about making changes. The kind of the Kaizen method is making the smallest possible step you can in the direction that you want to head. So, like, for example, if you want to start getting the habit of flossing your teeth, then you would just floss one tooth. The goal is to break it down into such a small, tiny, tiny step that you can't not do it. If you want to start working out, you're going to figure out, what is the bare minimum that I could do every day that's so small that I couldn't not do it. Maybe that is one sit up, or one push up, or one jumping jack. The goal here isn't, obviously, doing one sit up, right? Or flossing one tooth isn't going to get you the results that you're looking for. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to start developing the habit of the thing, the habit of exercise, the habit of brushing your teeth, or flossing your teeth. The why this is so significant to us is because after trauma, the brain is completely overloaded. And a lot of people really struggle with being in that fight or flight mode all the time, like living in fight or flight mode. And when we're in that mode, it's very difficult to kind of think long term, to think kind of systematically and linearly, and to take on multiple things at one time. And so, because of that, it's I think more common than not for people to feel very overwhelmed and just kind of throw their hands up in the air, and just kind of sit down in life. And so this book, it just talks about another strategy, as far as some ideas to kind of tiptoe around the amygdala, tiptoe around that fight or flight area, and just to start kind of successfully taking on moving forward in a new direction in a very non-threatening way. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Miss Lee Anderson says, yes, hard for me to make decisions, etc. Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's so common. So common for trauma. You probably have heard me joke around on this channel at that time in my life, really was stress in general, but especially that time in life. Would refer to it as I'm like, I have mashed potatoes for brains. I have never had such muddled thinking before in my life. And oh my good grief, it was debilitating. Everything felt like this enormous undertaking. I was doing things in bizarre orders that didn't make sense. Like if I had 3 errands to run, let's say, um, this is not an example. This is not a hypothetical example. This is like a real life example. Kind of this one time I had to go to the grocery store. I had to, I think, go to the bank, then I had to go somewhere else. And it was really hot outside. It was in New Mexico. Um, and so kind of logic would dictate I would go grocery shopping last. Again, this would be kind of something I wouldn't even think about any other time because, it's 110 degrees in the shade. So, uh, but I wasn't thinking straight. And so I went grocery shopping first, and then I ran other errands and then came back, and I've stuff all my stuff, frozen stuff is unfrozen. The um I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, of course it would like, of course this wasn't a good idea. Like, why did I do this? And that was when I really realized, okay, um this is kind of my highest and best effort here. And if I'm doing kind of basic things in such a muddled, kind of nonsensical way, in what other ways is this surfacing in my life that I'm not aware of? Like I had, hard evidence. I've got melted ice cream all over my car. This is a problem. What other ways is it surfacing that I'm not seeing? So it can be helpful at this time if you have any big decisions to make, because some people do. Some people, it's not uh, that just the relationship ending, and then it can be court and divorce and kind of on and on and on. So it can be helpful to, if you have another trusted person in your life, whether it's a friend or a therapist or a life coach or you know somebody in the support group, you name it, to kind of um, just kind of to use other people as a sounding board and just say, hey, you know what, here's kind of what I'm thinking. Does that make sense? And um, there's kind of a fine line though with that, because then the other challenge is after trauma, people tend to really look towards others for validation. But here's the thing, we're not looking for validation in that. It's kind of, is this thinking clear? Like, does this make logical sense? And if not, then kind of what are their thoughts about it? But it's very important for you at the end of the day that you're able to turn inward and validate yourself and figure out, okay, is this decision, does this work for me? Is this for my highest and greatest good and the highest and greatest good of my kids mainly, um, moving forward? And will it be, is this going to be a good decision in 6 months or 6 years from now? Trying to think as long term as you can, instead of a kind of immediate. Okay. Let's see. Yes, yes, absolutely. Ellen says, trauma is trauma, regardless of how it happened. Yep. That's the other thing. That's probably probably the biggest messages that I need to add to that list is exactly that, because it's a lot of people um, tend to minimize what they went through, because especially when it comes to kind of PTSD or CPTSD, because they're thinking, oh, well, no, that's just caused by something horrific, right? Like that's just caused by going to war. And not only just going to war, it's, oh, I need to be like in the thick of it. in the firefight, in seeing all kinds of horrific things. Like it's got to be that, or it's somehow not valid. And the reality is, no, trauma is trauma. And not only is trauma trauma, um, it's different for different people, and it's different for different people at different ages. So what is traumatic to me now at the age of 43 is very different than what was traumatic for me when I was 16 versus when I was 6. And same thing with anybody else. So I think that's significant, because we can forget that, like, oh, okay, it's easy to, if we're not on the receiving end of something traumatic, it can be kind of difficult at times to understand, oh no, this is a really big deal to them. Like, for example, you leave me at home, I'm fine, I'm an introvert, I do just fine on my own, I'm good. uh, the age of 16, if I didn't have anything to do on a Friday night, uh, was probably pretty upset by that, and had hurt feelings, and all that. If I was 6 years old and or actually I should say, if I was 16 and I was left, let's say my parent left me alone when I was 16, it was kind of like no big deal. Kind of like, oh, okay, I'll see you later. Kind of nice to have the house to myself. I'm just gonna, well, what was I doing when I was 16? I don't know. I'm just going to go watch a movie, right? If I was 6 and your parent leaves you, and you don't, maybe you're not aware that they left, or they leave for a prolonged period of time, that can be really traumatic. A 3-year-old, you think about a 3-year-old maybe you're 5 feet away from them, but they don't see you because there's other people around. That can be traumatic for them. So yeah, what's considered traumatic by one person is different for the other. And with that said, you can even have the same incident and the same people, well, not the same people. You can have the same incident with people of the same ages. You could have identical twins, let's put it that way, in a horrific car accident, and kind of due to their kind of variety of experiences, their own level of um, you know, kind of resilience, their own perceptions of what happened, they're going to they're going to be left feeling potentially two very different ways about that same situation, even though they were both in the car and they're identical twins. So, yeah, if it's traumatic to you, it's traumatic, and it's not a contest. And there is, thankfully, it's not a democracy. Like in that respect, we don't need people to vote on it and to agree with, okay, yes, we've all decided that yes, this indeed was traumatic. No, it doesn't work that way. So, okay. Let me see. Let me scroll up here. Blickum Blickum says, hi, I'm new to this channel. I just wanted to say that you will heal. One day you'll realize that you can't logically miss having a dangerous, evil person in your life. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. I think as we move forward, well, as we move forward, and as new people start to come into your life, uh, it- there's kind of that benefit of contrast of the kind of this person as compared to that person. And when you start having healthier people in your life, uh, you become more painfully aware of, oh my gosh, this other person was absolutely horrific. This relationship was horrific. And that's when we kind of realize, okay, um, you know, I'm relieved to be out of that. There was nothing there for me. It's a lot easier to walk away from it and to not look back. I think it's more difficult well, for sure, it's more difficult to kind of gain that perspective when a person's fresh out, especially if they've made that abusive person a large part of their world, if not their whole world. Like if that abusive person was your social support, they were your best friend, they were, even though they were horrific to you at times, if they were kind of your everything, and now that relationship's gone, no matter how horrible they were, it's still very common to have those feelings of I miss them, or kind of holding on to the nostalgia of the good times, or um, yeah. So social support and connecting with other people, it's one of the top things that you can do for your healing. Research has shown this. It's not just my 2 cents on it. Um, Although that is also my 2 cents on it. And I've seen this. I know for me on a personal level, it catapulted um, my own healing, being in support groups, because it was in those support groups talking to other people, even if I wasn't talking to them, reading or hearing about their own experiences just gave me so much clarity and so much validation. um, it really kind of supercharges your own understanding of what was going on, and yeah, and normalizes how you're feeling, because it can be very difficult to share that with other people that don't understand. So, and there's lots of different support groups out there. Going to we're working on one that'll be going on my site here um, in the near future. So, yeah, I'll post more about that when we get there. Okay, let me see. Let me scroll down. Bonnie asks, "Do I think dogs sense when an abuser is around?" Depends. It depends on what kind of abusive person they are. If they're kind of that stereotypical, scary, unfriendly, mean, standoffish person, yeah, I do think animals can sense that. But there's a lot of abusers out there that come across as charming and friendly and cuddly and wonderful, and animals love them. So it just depends. Those kinds of questions, I think it's very important to kind of watch out for anything where we're talking about absolutes. Like, do I think, um, all animals, do animals sense, or do all dogs sense abusers, or do dogs sense all abusers? Anything that we're talking about some sort of like absolute, like a generalization, is is going it's not going to hold true, because we don't know all dogs, we also don't know all abusers. And the bigger point that I'm trying to make with that is it's very easy to kind of develop um, a a false sense of security with that, because I'm sure that you could come across some other people that talk about narcissism, and they would say, "Oh yeah, yeah, animals are very perceptive, and dogs don't like they can sense abusers, or they can sense dangerous people." And like I said, they can to a point, but but they can't always, and not every abuser is the same. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't want somebody to think, okay, well, um, this kind of learning this one thing, like, okay, that dogs can somehow sense abusive people, is going to somehow keep them safe. Even if their dog didn't like their ex who was abusive, that doesn't mean that another person, that doesn't mean that the dog is a kind of like a, bloodhound for abusive people. It just means that they didn't like your ex. And kind of the reason I bring that up is there's all kinds of information out there, and I'm probably guilty of it too, especially in my earlier years, of there's certain signs that are kind of floating around on the internet, like, okay, psychopaths have like this really intense gaze, and they look like this, right? They look like the guy from Heaven's Gate, or they look like Charles Manson. They have kind of this wild look in their eyes, and yeah, some of them do have that, but a lot of them don't. um Another one is narcissists don't cry. And I think that kind of ties into, oh, well, they don't have, they're kind of running really low on empathy and remorse. And because of that, when a person's running low on empathy and remorse, they don't cry. Yes. But the distinguisher is they don't sincerely cry. And And they might have real tears for other situations. You know, if something, they might love their dog. And if something happened to their dog, they might cry real tears, whereas they might be abusive to you or to somebody else. And they don't, I mean, they're completely detached from that and they have no empathy or remorse. And any tears they might cry might be all for show, or might be part of a manipulation or whatnot. So, hmm. Okay, let me scroll up here. Yeah, Amazon is saying it can be quite isolating when others around you don't understand the trauma of getting over these abusive relationships. It can leave you feeling lost and misunderstood. Absolutely. And I would add feeling victim blamed and re victimized and invalidated. So, yeah, when the messages that we're getting from other people is, oh, it could have been worse, or, oh, well, you survived it, or, um, um, oh, well, it only lasted for 6 months, or, um, oh, you just need to get back out there and date, or oh, you should be glad it's over. That person was a jerk, and therefore you shouldn't miss them, right? That's kind of the message, the implied message there. And the reality is, you were in a relationship with them, even if they weren't emotionally invested, or yeah, if they weren't really emotionally invested in it, you still were. And so it's still very real to you, and the pain that you feel is very real. And um, it really doesn't make it any easier to walk away from an abusive relationship because the person was abusive. For a lot of people, when they have those depth of those depths of emotion there, the highs and lows of an abusive relationship can be even more um, quote unquote bonding. It's trauma bonding, really, but it's bonding. It's still a form of bonding between two people than a normal healthy relationship. So when so there's this added level of intensity with abusive relationships that's not present in a normal relationship, or especially not in a healthy relationship. And that people don't understand that. And that's where all of that confusion comes from. That's why and it's one of the reasons it's so hard to leave. That you think about a person kind of leaving a cult. It's very much the same thing when you have, especially if they've made this their whole world, all of the other cult members, so the people in it, they're their friends. It's not uncommon for a person to leave an abusive relationship, and then they've got to leave all of the friends and family and everything behind that was connected to this other person. So it's not just that one loss of it's not just the it's it's not quote unquote just the loss of the person, it's the loss of the relationship, it's the loss of that sense of stability. It's the loss of a life that you knew. It's potentially the loss of friends and family that you accumulated throughout that relationship. It's a loss of routine. Like there's lots of different losses. There might be a loss of pets. Um, if they ended up, I don't know, keeping the dog or the cat. It might be a loss of a house. It could be a loss of a job. It could be if loss of a role. If you're going through a divorce, it's not quote unquote just a divorce. It's not just the ending of a marriage on paper. It's there's shifts in identity going from I was once a married person and now I am a divorced person. I'm back in now. What does this mean? Who am I in this role? What does this mean? And having to go through and get that clarity about that. Monica asks, does trauma stay in the body long after it's happened? It can, and I would say it normally does, unless there's a kind of intention. intention to process it. And so I really don't think that trauma kind of gets processed by accident, at least not in humans. In animals, you know, other forms of mammals, it can kind of running it out, exerting energy, like these kinds of things can help to process trauma. Humans we're more complicated. So, um, yeah, there's a really intense book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who it's a really interesting book about exactly that kind of the body, the events pass and maybe even the emotions pass, but the body remembers. And um, yeah, there's a lot, kind of different somatic forms of or body-based practices or interventions, I should say, with processing trauma that are out there that can help with that. It's one of the um, well, one of the many reasons I think EMDR is so effective is that. So they've found, like research has found that after trauma, um, using what's known as bilateral stimulation, so it's some form of stimulation on both sides of your body, whether it's tapping on shoulders, it can even be walking. So like walking and talking. If you're seeing a therapist, if you're, I don't know, once we can see people in person, walking and talking helps to process trauma more than just sitting. And I think the kind of the brain science behind it is that it's linking up both spheres of your brain. Trauma resides on the right side of the brain. So it's in the amygdala, it's in that fight or flight center. And helping to move things over to the left side of the brain. One of the ways to do that is it's through the use of word. It's verbalizing. It's using language. So it's it's taking those emotions, uh, putting them into words helps to move those emotions through because we're able to pinpoint what it is that we're experiencing, and then there's other interventions that can help you move that through. So um, yeah, yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of the thought process too behind the rapid eye movements during REM sleep. When if you've ever seen somebody uh, who's in that REM stage, it's kind of creepy looking, right? Their eyes are darting back and forth, and the thought behind it is that's kind of the brain's or that's kind of the brain's way of like defragging the hard drive. Like it's compressing all of this information so it can process it and get rid of it. Cynthia says my ex is covert. He does not appear evil. They are out there. And yeah, I can relate. I had two of those. And it's terrifying. I think like a lot of people, we all tend to kind of think, oh, that we would be able to see a dangerous person coming. And we would be wrong about that because dangerous people in real life don't tend to look like they do in the movies. It's not the villain in the corner in the black trench coat twirling his mustache. And it might not even be um, the villain might not be a guy, right? It might be a woman. There's, you know, it's evil doesn't see gender, it doesn't see race, it doesn't see age or religion or any of that. It's kind of I guess a person's way of being. It's behavior. It's not any of those things. So what I will say about that, this is kind of one of those like potholes or one of those, I don't know, ways people kind of get tripped up after moving forward or while they're moving forward and healing from abuse, and they kind of get back out there in the world and they're especially if they start dating again. This is something that trips people up is depending on what they depending on the kind of relationship that they're coming from. So let's say they tend to do the opposite. So let's say, for example, they had an abusive person who was more of that stereotype, the, you know, kind of sleeping with the enemy. If you've ever seen that movie, sleeping with the enemy kind of person, just never smiles, really, really intense. You can just tell, like, this dude, like, this guy is nothing but trouble. And it's just, he's like a Terminator. I mean, there's no empathy, there's no warmth, there's nothing likable about him. He's just he's just abusive. Everything about him just screams run, right? And so if a person is in a relationship with somebody like that, who's um, kind of more of the overt or outright abusive person, and maybe it's not even to that extent, but maybe it's along the same lines of, they're arrogant, they're rude, they're pushy, they're always picking fights, they're just jerks. um, then it's not uncommon for them to think, okay, well, I don't want anything to do with that ever again. So I'm going to do the exact opposite as a way to not get hurt. And it's not even on their radar of possibility that abusive people could be charming and likable and friendly and warm and good with dogs and all of these things. And then fast forward, in that type of person, abusive person who's charming and charismatic and likable and all of that, um, you know, they might start becoming more outwardly abusive, or it could completely fly under the radar, and then they're charming and charismatic kind of up until their mask slips, and then you realize, all kinds of stuff about them. But um, and then the opposite is true. So if a person is, I like to view it as, there's the snake in the street, which is like the obviously abusive person, or I should say more, I don't want to say obvious, more obvious. Um, it's more outwardly, that's a better word. It's a way to say that. They're the more outwardly abusive person. It's the snake in the street. Then you have the charming, charismatic, kind of the Bill Cosby type. Um, yeah, that kind. It's the snake in the grass. And if a person is experienced, they go from the snake in the street to the snake in the grass, then they're really rattled. And then the odds are they're going to start linking up all kinds of incorrect cause and effect with that, because they don't know what's really going on. Um, and some of the incorrect cause and effect they might link up is, oh, uh, um, I somehow need to change myself in order to attract different types of people. Or I'm working off karma from a previous life. Or God hates me. I'm cursed. Or, you know what, God's punishing me. I said, I don't know, I cut that nun off in traffic a year ago and I felt terrible about it. I didn't even see that she was there. And this is what this is. Or, you know what, I backed out on my, um, I didn't show up at my first wedding. I don't know, my high school sweetheart proposed to me. I said yes, and then I got cold feet at the last moment, and I feel terrible about that because they were a good person and they didn't deserve to be hurt like that. And so now that's what this is. It's um, you know, kind of karma, universal justice, or God or whatnot punishing me. But then the opposite is true. So then you have a person that has that snake in the grass relationship with the charming, charismatic person who everything I thought was great, and then they find out, oh my God, no, it's not. This person's been living a double life. They're a pathological liar. Who have I been sharing a bed with? Like, this is terrifying. So in order to feel safe, they take a certain degree of comfort in, I kind of like the snake in the street. I know what I'm getting. I'd rather have a snake in the street than somebody who is nice and friendly, because I don't know. I don't know if they're really that way, or if they want something from me, or if they're just going to explode later on or whatnot. So um, I've seen it happen both ways numerous times. And kind of the way out of that is to realize, um, instead of looking to other people, especially people that you're dating, to kind of keep you safe and to be on the level and to be, honest and trustworthy and reliable and to not be abusive. We have to learn to rely on ourselves of, you know what, my boundaries and standards and deal breakers are going to keep me safe. So there's only kind of so much screening or vetting that we can do with a person. Sometimes time shows you what you need to see. You have a few disagreements with somebody. I always encourage people, if you're going to go on dates, do something where um, that's a team oriented thing, like go to an escape room. How does this person handle stress? How do they handle losing? How do they handle working as a team? How do they handle frustration and anger? All of these things. Putting somebody in some hot water like that can show you a lot about them. And it can show you a lot in terms of how you work as a couple too, or would work as a couple. But sometimes, like I said, there's not a 100% foolproof way of making sure that you're not getting kind of a dud. So all you can do is the best that you can do. And um and just if I shouldn't say uh if when issues surface, because issues will surface in any relationship, they should be surfacing. It's healthy for issues to surface. When there's disagreements, when there's differences of opinion, all of that, when those issues surface, that we're able to bring them up, both people are able to be assertive, and there's effective communication, which includes effective listening, and there's that desire to be team oriented, and there's that desire to be solutions oriented. So, you know, and it's important to have deal breakers in that. Continuing to be team oriented and solutions oriented when somebody's cheating on you isn't, that's not good. Like, that's a problem. So this is why kind of there's that balance with knowing your deal breakers, knowing when it's time to walk away. And um, you know it can be a challenge. It takes time and it takes practice, but uh, you can get there. um Charlotte asks, um yeah, thanks for so much for all of your sage advice, Dana. You're welcome. I'm glad you get something out of these chats. How did you overcome the body dysmorphic disorder you experienced after Jack? Did it eventually pass? It did eventually pass. Um, and it was that was just such a weird time in my life. He only made like one kind of cutting comment. And it was one of the women that I found out that he had cheated on me with. And there were probably close to hundreds, um, men and women. Um, but he made I had confronted him about it because I was just, it's so, I mean, it's so weird to think back to that because I was so, I just had never knowingly, I guess, encountered somebody like that before. And so I was just every day I was continually blown away by, like, oh my gosh, there's no bottom here. Like, there's no bottom to the level of lying and the level of kind of deceitfulness. It's shocking. And anyways, so it was, I'd asked him about cheating, and he made some sort of comment like, oh, well, can you blame me? Kind of insinuating that I was disgusting. And I think it was that. And then just finding out about well, not all, because I don't think I found out everything. I think probably what I know is probably not even 10%. I mean, who knows? But um, finding out what I did was so just shocking. And I don't know, it was just bizarre. It just kind of, um, like, I didn't understand how I could have somebody like that in my life. I didn't understand how I could not see that I had somebody like that in my life. I I guess it was almost like a weird form of like disassociation because I just was not, I just was, it was, everything was so surreal. I didn't recognize myself in the mirror. Um, I, I, it was all very disorienting. It was so strange that, um, yeah, I guess it went away in time. Because I, I don't know if I even really shared that with anybody. If anything, I might have shared it in passing with a couple friends because it was just very strange. It almost felt like I was dead. I don't even know how to describe it. It just nothing felt real. It felt like, um, yeah, it was like an out of body experience or something. It just was so. It was very. It was long lasting. It was just very strange. Um, but yeah, I didn't do anything formally to. Not that I remember. I mean, I don't think I did. I mean, I don't think I went to therapy for it. I don't think I did any type of like grounding exercises. Yeah. I wouldn't encourage anybody to follow that path and in waiting and doing what I did in that instance and thinking like, okay, well, I'm just gonna wait and hope this passes. Um, I I would seek help sooner than later for any of this, for all of this, because it's difficult to carry on your own, and seeking out a trauma informed uh, specialist. EMDR, I'm just, you know, these days I'm a huge fan of EMDR on so many different levels. One of the levels being you don't have to, it's not talk therapy. So you don't need to talk, you don't need to um, share your the full experience of what happened to you. It's basically going to one event and um, you're kind of holding, I mean, you're basically the therapist is there to guide you through this process. So you don't even like, it's not about sharing your story. It's not about them believing you. It's not about them. It kind of cuts out a lot of the potential problems with talk therapy. Um, and because you're not sharing so much, you're not potentially the risk of feeling kind of invalidated or you know, your experience being questioned or minimized is, I mean, significantly reduced. So if I had to do things over again, I would have sought out EMDR immediately because I mean, you can see some pretty massive changes and shifts at the end of the first session. It's pretty cool. So, and the kind of the downside of talk therapy is, um, you know, it can be hard. It can be really painful to revisit everything, but everybody's different too. That's the thing. So sometimes we need to get into therapy and to just to have somebody else be witness to this is what happened to me. I need to say this out loud and I just need for you to listen. And I would encourage you, if you do go into talk therapy with a therapist, especially if their specialty is CBT, because this is kind of the go-to for a lot of therapists, is to let them know this. I was in an abusive relationship, and um, like I, if you're wanting to talk about a certain thing, like I want to talk about this. Uh, this experience is very sensitive to me, and I just need for you, I just need for you to listen, or I need I need for you to believe me, or I need for you to, you know, please don't tell me that I need to get over it. Please don't tell me that, um, you know, I should be glad that it's over, or any of those things, because that's really feeling very re-victimizing. So I think a quality, like a good therapist, especially for somebody who's trying to process trauma, is finding a good therapist is one where you can have a good relationship with them. And a good relationship is going to be that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. So it's going to involve both people being assertive. And um, and so that they need to be receptive to, if, because here's the thing, especially with the person who's experienced trauma, it can feel like you're kind of trying to disable a ticking bomb. You don't know, blindfold, like you don't know where certain wires are. It's very, very easy to unintentionally um, kind of, trip across the wrong wire, and then that person feels victimized and right back to square one. And for practitioners who have good intentions who do that, I will tell you, it's an absolutely devastating feeling. So, and it's even worse if the person doesn't say anything, and then you might find out through the grapevine, or um, kind of whatnot. So it's really important to not assume that your therapist just knows how you feel, or that they should know to kind of not do stuff. Um, Hopeful, I mean, to some level, hopefully, if they're trauma informed, that they have some sort of, you know, understanding of working with people in trauma, and what's appropriate behavior with that. But if they do cross a boundary, uh, that they're open to discussing it with you. That's important. I would say that's so important, that that's the first phone call to them before you even set up a session, to have kind of that established. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up. That's a great way to put that, truth seeker. She says, people assume it's pleasant being out of your body during trauma. It's not, it's horrible. It's like being seasick and trying to swim back into your body. Wow, that is so well said. Yeah, it gives me goosebumps. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's just the weirdest disjointed feeling. I had another experience like that after the house fire. Um, I was in this bad house fire about 3 years ago. I was like, talk about an emotional roller coaster. I heard a loud boom, and I thought we had an incident the day before. There was a guy that came to the door who was who'd come to the door, I think like the day before that, asking for money, and um a real kind of scary dude, but he left. We said no, he left. Came back the next day. I was home alone. I think he I don't know if he knew I would be home, or kind of what, if he was just planning on breaking in. And anyways, um when he came back, this is the day before the house fire, uh he wouldn't go away, and was pounding on the door, was screaming at me, all of these kinds of things. I had to call 911. It was terrifying. So the day of the house fire, there was a loud boom, and I thought he'd come back, and I thought he'd kicked down the door, and I went to go hide in the closet, and I had called 911, and I was waiting, and then there was no noise or anything, and then I realized, like, okay, well, maybe it was, I don't know, a transformer bursting or something. And I went around the corner, and I saw smoke coming up the stairs. And I still thought, okay, no big deal, like something blew in the basement. Um, Started going down the stairs, and everything, then it was just black smoke, and it was everywhere, and it was so freaking fast, and I couldn't see, and I couldn't breathe. And anyways, long story short, I got out, everything was okay. Um, but what stayed with me was, had I been in that closet for like an extra, I mean, 7 seconds, I wouldn't be here today. And it was the thought of what could have been, uh, was that that was difficult to process. And so, anyways, so after that, um, I'd made plans, but before that, the fire, my mom was going out of town, and she lives in another state. And so I was going to go watch her cat for her while she was on this trip with my aunt. And um, so I thought, oh, this will be good. It'll be good, kind of change of scenery. And um, yeah. And so I was in Colorado for like 2 weeks or something. And I was having like disassociating the whole time I was there. It was so weird where I began to kind of question, like, am I dead? Because none of it was, it was like, when you're in a dream and you're like, this isn't right. I was like, wait a minute, why am I in my mom's house? And why isn't she here? And when was the last time I spoke to anybody? Because I was just staying in the house. I'm like, I haven't talked to anybody in like a week. I just have been in the house. Like, did I die in that fire? Like, am I? I was so weird, so weird. And trying to do a series of reality checks to see, like, no, I think this is real. Like, this isn't a dream. Like, this is real, and I'm here. And trying exactly that, trying to and literally feeling nauseous because you're like floating above your body. It's literally that feeling of seasickness, of um I don't know, like your equilibrium is off. It's just so weird. And yeah, trying to get back into your body for that. Wild. Yeah. Yeah, that's another great example. Monica says, yeah, it made me feel like I was losing my mind. I could not remember what my signature was. I had a brain operation a couple years back in 2013. I'm not sure if it had to do with that or what. Yeah, wow. I just said, it just was so scary. I didn't know what happened to me. I was there and then I completely blanked out, and this lady was giving me strange looks. Yeah. Yeah. So strange. Let me see. Let me scroll up. Okay, so the earlier part of Monica's question was, she says, Dana, can trauma make you forget certain things, like the way you sign your name or the way you used to write? I went to the bank the other day for some official work and I could not sign my name. Yes. And is that, I don't remember if that was in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, but I do remember seeing that someplace and thinking that that was very interesting. So it's trauma, trauma can feel like a giant, kind of like a giant firecracker just kind of going off on your brain. And it affects so many different regions. And I think the reason it affects handwriting, I'm guessing here, I'm just kind of going out on a limb, is Nick, how, well, this is probably only one part of that, but uh normally our handwriting, if our handwriting is pretty smooth and rhythmic, there's a certain degree of flow to that. But if we're really hurried, our handwriting might look very different, right? That we might push harder, we might kind of change the slant, the letters might be very different, these kinds of things. You can tell, I think, a lot about what's going on with the person based off of their handwriting. It can be very telling. So it doesn't surprise me. That would be something I would be curious to learn more about that, and kind of what other areas of the brain. And if I'd also be curious, because the brain is such a fascinating thing that sometimes, like, because there is kind of that mind body connection. If if a person's handwriting is really, what would be the word for that, let's say scattered, or there's more energy behind it. If a way to help reach that center of the brain, or that reach that part of the brain, would be to, if you could reach it through doing handwriting exercises where you're going with intention and practicing, very slow, smooth, scripted, kind of cursive writing, if it could work both ways. If the brain is feeling chaotic and it's coming out in a chaotic script, if you could help to calm that area by reversing it, using calm script to help calm that area of the brain. I don't know. That's a thesis project for somebody right there. That would be very interesting. Um, Cynthia says my ex would control even when I tried to express my feelings. He would cut me off and invalidate me. He'd put words in my mouth. Yes. So this can be one of the more like subtle forms of, and well, it can be one of the more subtle forms of controlling or abusive behavior if we don't see it for what it is. So before we were more awake to a lot of this stuff, that those kinds of things can very easily, and I think very often, be minimized and justified and kind of glossed over, like, oh, it's not that big of a deal because it's just kind of this one time thing. I don't want to create a fuss. I don't want to fight about it. I'm just going to let it go. And when we start waking up to kind of seeing, oh, okay, there's a wide variety of ways that our boundaries can be pushed or crossed or completely violated by another person, and that it's important to not minimize those times and to address them and to see how that person responds to it. So yeah, that's a problem if we're with somebody and we're kind of, it's that chronic invalidation where this, and it can, again, this person could even have well intentions. um, it sometimes, um, but either way, if they're well intended or if they're not, then it's still a problem, and it's worthy of addressing and stopping, because these are the slow poisons of a relationship. This is how that resentment starts to build. And and here's the other kind of kind of flawed thinking that tends to go along with this. I'm definitely guilty of it, so I'm not calling anybody out here, but uh, is the thought can be, oh, okay, well, this is not a big deal, so I don't want to fight. I don't want to make it into a big deal. I'm just going to let it go. And then the thinking is, oh, okay, but I won't let things go if it becomes a big enough issue. And then what tends to happen is, if we struggle with, if having uh, being assertive in very low stakes situation. I don't know. We're at a restaurant and you order a meal and they bring you the wrong meal and you think, oh, I'm just going to let it go. Or your significant other says something that kind of just doesn't sit right with you, and you think, oh, I'm just going to let it go. If we're thinking, if we're struggling with being assertive in these very low stakes situations, then we're really going to struggle with the higher stake situations. So there is no such thing as kind of um, a situation that's an issue that's not important, because this is where you get that practice in, and it's how you keep a relationship balanced. If a lot of things are going unsaid by one or both people, that relationship's in trouble. You may not realize it yet, but that top, like we talked about, it's starting to wobble. And what a lot of people do in those situations when they start to notice the wobble of, okay, our things aren't working, um, they, well, depends on the person, I guess, but a lot of times they'll try to focus on, uh, okay, I need to fix my relationship. So I'm going to do more loving things for this other person. I'm going to, which is great, but it often includes, I'm going to rock the boat even less. I'm going to be an even better partner. I'm going to, I don't know, dress sexier, I'm going to do more things around the house, or I'm going to somehow just be a better partner for them in all the ways, including I'm just going to start silencing more of myself. And that's a problem. So, um, yeah, noticing, especially if you're dating, if, uh, if you're kind of, if you're in those situations where you're like, gosh, um, I don't appreciate that this person, I don't know, they ordered for me at the restaurant and they didn't let me choose. They took the liberty of thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to order this for him or for her. Like, and if that doesn't sit right with you, it's important that you say something. If, so like there is no such thing as a small deal. This is how these are the boundaries that we're setting. And this is how we teach people to kind of where our boundaries are because people don't know. And it's also how we live an authentic life. And here's the big, maybe the kind of most ironic part of it all is it's in those moments of being assertive and bringing things up to a person, no matter how small. That's how emotional safety between two people grows because they realize they don't have to second guess, like, oh, is this person mad at me? Or are they, how do they really feel about this? Or are they just saying that? Like, there isn't any of that because they know if there's an issue that you'll bring it up. You might not bring it up in that moment if you're still learning these skills, or if the issue is um, something that you kind of need to think about, but they know that in time that you will eventually bring it up. And that's what makes people feel safe is I know where I stand with you. I know where I stand with you. And when there is that ability to be like, this is how I'm feeling, this is the problem, we need to figure out some sort of plan to address it. That's when that relationship can deepen. When the other person's receptive, it's like, okay, I get it. I hear you. That was not my intention. Um, I can completely understand how you would feel that way. I won't do it again. Like, you know? So, okay, let's see. Right. Yeah, exactly. Cynthia says, be more loving, quote unquote, with a narcissist means give more and more in exchange for crumbs. You make yourself smaller and smaller. Yes. Yep. If that's the only tool that we have in our toolkit for how to make a relationship work is through being nice. Like, okay, well, I'll be nice. I'll be more ingratiating. I'll give gifts. I'm going to try to people please my way into making this person happy and making this relationship peaceful, then that's a problem. And that relationship's unbalanced and it's going to topple over because it's sort of like if you had a car that only had a gas pedal. Okay, that's going to work up until it doesn't, right? So, uh, you need a steering wheel, you need a brake pedal, there's other things that a car needs in order to function. And same with relationships. Like it's wonderful to be thoughtful and to be caring and to be team oriented and to be solutions oriented and all of this. But we don't have if we don't know how to be assertive or boundaries and standards and deal breakers or any of these things, it's just like that car that only has the gas pedal. And that's a very valid point too. Truth Seeker says, yep, communication is only worthwhile with the right people. Yes. If you are in a situation where, uh, you have tried being assertive, you have tried being solutions oriented, and it's not working, and it's starting to feel like I am banging my head against a wall. What is going on here? That it, the issue, uh, one person can't take on 100% of the responsibility of making a relationship work. So if the other person is just unwilling or unable for whatever reason to communicate effectively, that's a problem. That's a huge imbalance. Yeah, it's true. Kayla says, yeah, communication feels pointless without comprehension. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that's very true too. Truth Seeker says otherwise, um, you're giving away your location, emotionally speaking, to someone who considers it a battle and has a vested interest in harming you. Yes, especially if that person has already proven that, um, that they're interested in emotionally harming you. If you, um, if they, uh, if whenever you do disagree, they become destructive in some way, shape, or form. They start kind of sabotaging you. I don't know, you have a really passive aggressive coworker who starts sabotaging your efforts, or you have a significant other who, when you fight, they pull out all that, there's no holds barred. They'll pull out the things that they know that you are the most sensitive about. The death of a loved one, your weight, I don't know, your age, your children, and they'll go for the jugular on that. That's that kind of person who goes for the kill in a fight is not somebody who's team oriented or relationship material, because fights disagreements, I should say, disagreements happen in a relationship. They don't always um relationships don't always have to get to a fighting level. Disagreement can stay disagreement, and it can stay friendly, and it can stay um, um appropriate, and um doesn't have to get to this knock down, drag out kind of a thing. And um and it definitely doesn't, if a person's to the point of like, okay, if they fight to the point of, I need to destroy you in order to win, then that's like that's big time relationship poison. That's really problematic. Scorpio says, how do I deal with cognitive dissonance? I feel like trying to bond with somebody for 5 years, putting them on a pedestal, and for it to turn into a trauma bond after coming closer. Okay. Well, the cognitive dissonance is, well, let's back up a little bit. So, cognitive dissonance is something that we all experience on a pretty regular basis, regardless of the situation that we're in. So, I think kind of just knowing that that's just a thing that we all experience can kind of, um, it can help to, I think, understand it a little bit more clearly. So, cognitive dissonance, it's when um, we're having kind of two. It's a mental distress. It's a form of mental distress that we experience when we have two conflicting thoughts about the same topic at the same time. It's the I want to lose weight and I want to eat ice cream. It's the I love this person, but um, I I fear them, or I feel safe with this person and I fear them, or uh, I this relationship is really fulfilling, or I need to get the hell out of here. So, and that all of that mental back and forth, that's where that mental anguish comes from, because and a lot of it stems, in terms of abusive relationships, it stems from hoping or wishing the situation was something other than it was. So it's kind of us slipping in and out of denial of, things are really bad. Oh, okay, no, things are kind of workable. No, things are really bad. Okay, well, things are kind of workable. um, this person's dangerous. Oh, no, no, they're the love of my life. It can be that back and forth. So that back and forth is often accompanied by, kind of goes hand in hand with the highs and lows of a relationship. So the good times are really good. We're like, oh, this person's amazing. I feel like they're my soulmate. This is, so great. Uh, Things go bad. They tend to go really bad. You find out about cheating or lying or stealing, or um, there's abuse of some kind. And then the bad times it can be very, very tense, because there's this level of uncertainty. Is this relationship going to continue? What's going to happen next? And then if I don't know, say that you break up or things are tense and then they reopen contact and then it's sort of that relief of, oh, okay, everything's going to be fine now. I'll, everything's back to quote unquote normal. And then it's not. And then the bottom falls out again. And it's kind of highs, lows. That level, that's one of the reasons why abusive relationships can feel so intense. And it's that feeling of I've never been loved like this before, and I've never um, been hurt like this before. Because the good times can feel so good and the bad times can feel so bad. Kind of healthy or even, normal to healthy relationships don't have those highs and lows. So it's easy to kind of get comfortable and to settle in because there's not this that level of intensity there. It's predictable, it's safe, it's secure. You're not always um, the downside to abusive relationships. It's all of the questioning, it's the being hurt physically or emotionally, it's all of these things. But then when the good times are good and you might feel like really loved or really accepted, it feels kind of twice as good because the low was so low. So you're kind of going from like a -10 all the way up to a +10. Whereas in a normal relationship, the range is much less. It might go from things might go from, I don't know, 3 to a 7. They're kind of just in that zone. So it's much more extreme. And that's where those trauma bonds come from. And that's where those intense feelings come from. So, okay, so what do you do about them? Cutting through that cognitive dissonance, one of the things that helped me, one of the exercises I encourage people to do is to write out a letter. I call it the for when you miss him or her letter. And you title it that. And in that letter, you write down in bullet point format so it's easy to scan. Not so you're not writing full sentences or full paragraphs or anything. You're writing down this bullet point format of all of the reasons that this relationship is not good for you and why you need to not go back. And so if you're feeling the kind of strings of nostalgia pulling at you of, oh, I really miss this one time and I wonder how they're doing. And oh gosh, it's Christmas. I miss, but all of that you go back and you pull up that letter and then you read it and it'll cut through all of that nostalgia and the thinking, kind of the wishful thinking of maybe this time it would be different and maybe I can just contact them or maybe we can be friends. Well, surely a phone call won't hurt, right? It cuts through all of that and you're brought back right into the reality of no, this is painful, this is not working, I can't reopen this door. So, and as far as the trauma bonds, kind of breaking free from those, really in large part, I think it helps just to realize that's what it is, that they're trauma bonds, and that's why they feel so intense. Your brain is being flooded with chemicals. You have all of the stress hormones, you have cortisol and adrenaline, and then the relief. You have dopamine and oxytocin when things are good. You don't have all of that in a healthy relationship. Definitely to that degree. So realizing this is why you feel so intensely. It's not love. And it's easy to confuse that for love because society has this very sick idea of what love is. Love is not intense feelings for somebody. That's generally infatuation or it's infatuation, it's a trauma bond, or it's some sort of unhealed attachment wound. It's not love. Like love is calm, love is um safe, love is secure, love feels like freedom, it feels like you can breathe, it feels like you're appreciated for who you are. It's not this unhinged neediness of feeling like I need this person in my life or I'm going to die. That's not love. That's a trauma bond, or it's um you know codependency, or it's attachment, kind of anxious style of attachment. Thanks, Huffle Mom. She says, uh, Sky says, yes, I've been in several relationships where it was clear they wanted to get me love or sex addicted. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there. And Jack says, yeah, he's been watching videos and reading up on how the brain is wired for social connection. And yes, some people have figured out how to exploit that. Yes. Yeah, they have. It's one of the very common uh, technique, the love bombing, especially for kind of like the whole pickup artist community or um, um, con artists in general. So uh, they prey on I think innocent, kind of gullible people, but also just normal, decent, trusting people. It doesn't have to be somebody that's really lonely or really gullible. It can be just a normal, decent human being who doesn't go around thinking that people could have such malicious intentions to be so exploitative. And mm, yeah, so um it's concerning that love bombing with online scammers. They're kind of catching on, like they're becoming more savvy, but they back in the day they used to come on really strong, and they would tell you um I remember a friend of mine, this was years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, a friend of mine, this was her first go around with online dating and coming across an online scammer, and she didn't realize it. And so, of course, she thought she'd met this, super cute guy who just happened to be in the military and he was overseas, and he'd sent her this email. And if, again, like once you see this kind of stuff, you can't unsee it. So it's clear to you because you see it, right? Um, and so she was showing me this email that he'd sent her, and very clearly the cut and paste thing, and it was telling her everything that a person would want to hear. He really values family, and he values supporting the other person. He's looking for a partner. He wants something real. He wants to settle down. Kind of, he wants nothing other than to be really good for her. Blah blah blah. And um, and my friend at this time happened to be very lonely, so she was just really eating that up because it was everything that anybody would that was really lonely would want to hear. But I have to say it's interesting, kind of being outside of that when it's not directed towards you, because of course it's always easier to see like it's always easier to see the kind of um to see those kinds of things clearly when it's not directed at you, right? Because there's not that emotional investment. And if we're not on the receiving end of it. And um, one of the things that I noticed, which I found odd at the time, and this is, I guess, kind of stayed with me, is at the time I thought, but where are you in all of this? Like, this guy just sent you this real schmoozy email. Yeah, okay, it's real flowery and it sounds wonderful, but he doesn't ask any questions about you. He doesn't there's not This is not personal. This could just be for anybody. Like, that doesn't bother you? Like, that seems kind of very generic. And I mean, of course, it's a scam artist, but even if the guy was legit, it's like this guy is just in love with being in love. He just wants to be in love. Does he love you? Does he even know who you are? And that was kind of a big takeaway for me, um, with all of that. Is for a long time I was kind of making myself giving myself a headache trying to figure out what is the difference between like love bombing and infatuation, and spending all of this time when I was dating trying to figure that out so I wouldn't get caught up in it again. And then I realized we don't need to figure out the sincerity of the other person. We don't have to figure out, are they an emotional con artist? Like, are they legitimate? We don't have to figure that out. All we have to do is realize that kind of best case scenario, it's infatuation. Worst case scenario, it's exploitation. Uh, Either way, we lose because either way, it's insincere. And it's it's a sign, it's emotionally immature. And don't get me wrong, like the first stage of a relationship is often infatuation. The difference is, so there is that feeling, right? The rose-colored glasses. Oh, this person's so amazing. You're so wonderful. You're everything I've been looking for, blah, blah, blah. All of that. That's those feelings, wanting to spend all your time with that person, thinking that they just walk on water. All of that's very normal. However, for a more emotionally mature person, they realize this is just a stage in a relationship. It's not real. It'll pass. And this is why it's important that there's more of a foundation there to keep things going, because that level of, feel good passion kind of stuff, it's fleeting. And so it's important to not make any major commitments during that time because it is fleeting. Okay. So let's see. Let me scroll up here. Um, let's see here. Let me scroll up here. Yeah, absolutely. Truth Seeker says, yeah, this is why love bombing works on people who don't know what's going on, because the brain is meant to connect, and that has been cruelly exploited by a con artist. Yep, absolutely. There's so many ways. I think that there's this kind of like the vast majority of people, uh, there's kind of these basic desires that we all have. Um, the desire to connect, the desire to feel loved, the desire to or desire to feel loved, the desire to connect, the desire to, if we see somebody that's in pain, that we want to help. And that's another way that manipulative people can manipulate. Um, so, you know, kind of playing the whole role of that they need you, baby bird with a broken wing, and that they don't know what they would do without you, and especially for those of us that are, uh, that kind of, um, for whatever reason, um, we're more in tune with the pain of others than we are with our own. So we see somebody in pain, we kind of feel twice for them. So it's sort of like, oh my gosh, I know what you're going through. I've been through that. I don't want you to have to go through that. I don't want anybody else to have to go through that. So I want to help you because I wasn't able to be helped, or I wasn't able to help myself. So I want to help you. So at least I can help somebody not experience that. But you've got a lot of manipulative people that are preying on that. So you see this with like GoFundMe accounts. You see this in support groups at times. You see this with dating. Feelings of guilt and obligation can be really strong. Um, it can be difficult to, especially if the person, if it's maybe not even intentional, but that person's in a bad place, and to have to say, like, I can't have this in my life. Like, I remember, for example, I dated a guy when I was in my early 20s, and uh, he had a drinking problem. And I didn't, sometimes it takes a little while to kind of see those things clearly. And I lived in like a, um, kind of like the old town areas, like walking distance to shops and bars and stuff. And he had walked to my house and passed out on my porch. And um, that was kind of the realization. And he'd also been kicked out of a few bars by then. So it was kind of, I couldn't minimize or justify this anymore. Like, it was very clear, like, okay, he has a drinking problem. And I felt terrible. It was really hard for me to end that relationship because I'm like, this guy needs help. Like he needs help. But the reality was I couldn't help him. And continuing to date him wasn't helping him. It was only sinking me. And but I stayed in that relationship for probably a couple months longer than I would have, out of guilt and obligation, because I just, it's hard to see somebody to suffer, but it, that goes back to kind of getting that balance and realizing, um, you know, that relationships need to have that sense of mutuality. And it's a problem if we're staying in situations, kind of putting our own wants or needs last and putting somebody else's first, especially on a continual basis. And, um, especially with dating, like that's the purpose of dating is to see, like, is this person a good fit? It's to use that level of discernment to be like, okay, this is kind of what I'm looking for my life. Does this person meet that? And if they don't, then being like, okay, like I need to go. That can be hard to do, but it's necessary. Let's see. Let me scroll up. Uh, let me scroll here. Um, let's see. Let me scroll. Okay, thanks, Huffle. Mom says, okay, Tanya asked, while he was discarding me, he wanted to change his look. Is that a sign of a narcissist? Well, well, at a minimum, it's a sign of somebody who's moving on. So, um, there's kind of that, I don't joke, I guess. Women, after women go through a breakup, it's not uncommon that they change their hair, kind of a thing. So, um, it's not uncommon for people as a way, I think maybe even subconsciously, to kind of signal to themselves that they're transitioning in their life to change up their appearance. Where it becomes really bizarre is when you have somebody who's changing up their appearance to mirror the next person. That's when it gets really weird. And you kind of realize this person doesn't have a sense of identity. Their identity is coming from outside of themselves. So, an example of this, and I'm not saying anything that this person is or isn't a narcissist or whatever, but like Brad Pitt is a great example of this. I've always found that really odd about him. He morphs into the look of whoever he's dating. If you go back and look at pictures when he was with, was it Gwyneth Paltrow? Same hair color, same kind of style. When he was with Jennifer Aniston, same hair color, same kind of style. And he was with Angelina Jolie, same hair color. It's just really weird how there's not that. Uh, there's just kind of this enmeshment going on, this morphing. It's 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 just very strange. So, that in itself is kind of a concern to me when I see that, especially if I'm dating somebody or whatnot. Because at a minimum, it's showing that, that they're not really grounded in who they are. And that's a problem because in order for a relationship to be authentic, each person has to be relatively grounded in who they are. And if a person can be so easily swayed with they don't have again, I don't know, obviously I don't know Brad Pitt, I don't want to make any judgment calls about that. I just appearance wise, that's what I noticed. But if that person's seeming, if their likes, their interests and things are really morphing into the next person that they're dating, um the problem with that is they can easily morph into something else because it's um potentially kind of not who they are. It's like they're kind of this level of a social chameleon in order to be in a relationship, to have that relationship stay together. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, where you've got somebody who's maybe even pretending, oh yeah, I really like football and I really like I don't know, classic rock, and I really like all these things because that they're the person that they likes those things. And but then if that relationship ends, they just boom, they drop all of that. And they're like, no, I never liked any of that to begin. It can be very, if you're in a relationship with somebody and then they leave and then all of a sudden kind of everything you knew about them, they're no longer into, it's bizarre. It's very unsettling. Sort of like, gosh, did I ever know you? Like, do you know you? Sky Dyson mentions Codependence Anonymous, Coda. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in Coda for sure. Yeah, Kayla says, I would assume that they've become infatuated with somebody new and are mirroring what that person likes. Huffle Mom asks, are there narcissists recovering at Codependence Anonymous? Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. I think what's interesting is I would say probably the vast majority of narcissists out there don't, well, I think it's kind of part of it, right? There's this idea of kind of that need to not have anything wrong with them. So it's sort of like, well, it can never be my fault. It's always everybody else's fault, kind of a thing. So because of that, I think you get a lot of narcissists who think that they are codependent or struggle with codependency, or that they are empaths, or that they care so much. In their mind, the script is they're the perpetual victim. So it's, yeah, they're, and even here's the thing, even if the person's not a narcissist, there's degrees of dysfunction in most people. This is why it's so important that we're not just, it's our radar isn't just set to scan for like narcissists or sociopaths. It's set to scan for problematic behavior in general because it's out there. It's within us too. Like we all have it to some degree. Um, and it's seeing it for what it is and being able to address it with ourselves or with the other person or both and resolve it. That matters. So yeah, there's problematic people there's problematic behavior in people everywhere. Just the degree and frequency that um, really becomes a problem, as well as how receptive they are if you bring it up. If they cross a boundary and they just, they're not hearing it, it's there you go. That's a problem. So I think I'm going to turn in a little early tonight, if that's okay. And um, yes. Okay. Sorry. Got caught up in the chat. I'm going to turn in a little bit early tonight. So I guess thank you guys so much for being here. I just wanted also to let you know you can subscribe to text notifications by texting the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. And you can also subscribe. I have words of encouragement that go out too. So you can type the words I thrive, all one word, to the number 22999, and you can get those. So, yes. So, with that said, as always, lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward. So, take care and just lots of love to you guys. Okay. Good night.